For 60 years, I believed unanswered prayer meant one of three things. God wasn't listening, God wasn't there, or I wasn't praying right. I was wrong about all three, and the moment I discovered why, it changed the way I talk to God, for good. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand something that changes the way you see every no you've ever gotten from heaven. Maybe you've prayed the same prayer for months, years even. Healing for someone you love, a door to open, a marriage to survive, a child to come back to faith. And every day without an answer felt like proof that nothing was changing. Until a question started forming, quiet but persistent. God, are you even listening? If you've asked that question, you're in good company. David asked it. Habakkuk asked it. Even Martha, standing beside her brother's tomb, wondered why Jesus hadn't come sooner. Waiting has always been part of faith. That doesn't make it easier. Here's what I've noticed about waiting. The longer it stretches, the more our imagination fills in the silence. Maybe I'm not faithful enough. Maybe he's disappointed in me. Maybe this is his way of saying no. The silence starts writing stories, and most of them are lies. So I want to take you somewhere unexpected. Not to David, not to Abraham, to a garden late at night, where a man is praying the most honest prayer ever recorded, and it's about to break every assumption you have about how God answers. Jesus is alone. His friends are asleep nearby, and he prays, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." I used to read that line and move past it quickly. Now I stop there every time. Because here's what nobody tells you in Sunday school. Jesus asked. The Father heard, and the answer was still no. Sit with that for a second. The perfect Son of God prayed a sincere prayer, and he didn't get what his human heart wanted. So if unanswered prayer automatically means God isn't listening, what do we do with Gethsemane? The Father wasn't absent. He wasn't indifferent. He was doing something Jesus couldn't fully see yet, even in that moment of agony. Which raises an uncomfortable question. How many silences in your own life were never empty at all? We tend to measure God by what changes around us. But what if his deepest work happens somewhere we can't see? I used to think prayer existed to change my circumstances. Now I think, more often, it exists to change me, the one walking through them. That didn't come to me overnight. It came through a man named Paul, and something he called a thorn in his flesh. We don't know exactly what it was. Maybe that's the point. Because whatever it was, it's something every one of us recognizes. Paul begged God to remove it. Not once, 3 times. And this wasn't a polite request. This was desperate pleading, the kind that comes with trembling hands and empty hope. Have you ever begged God like that? Paul did, and God answered, just not the way Paul expected. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. At first, that sounds almost like a letdown, until you realize what actually happened. God didn't ignore Paul's prayer. He answered a deeper one Paul hadn't even known he was praying. Paul wanted freedom from the thorn. God wanted Paul to discover dependence. One would have changed his circumstances. The other transformed his heart. Which one do you think lasted longer? That question followed me home. I started looking back at my own list of unanswered prayers, doors that never opened, people who walked away, dreams that quietly ended. At the time, I called those disappointments. Today, some of them have different names: protection, redirection, preparation. But here's the part that still stops me cold. When I look back at my hardest seasons, I don't just see what God withheld. I see who I became because He withheld it. More patient, more compassionate, less addicted to certainty, closer to Him, not because life got easier, but because I stopped measuring prayer only by what it changed outside of me. Before we go further, if this is landing somewhere true for you, hit like and subscribe. Every week we dig into faith and scripture like this, and honestly, the part coming next is the one that changed how I understand waiting completely. Once you hear it, I don't think you'll look at silence the same way again. For years, every time I prayed, I watched my circumstances like a scoreboard. Did the door open? Did the diagnosis change? Did anything happen? Without realizing it, I made my circumstances the only proof that God was working. But what if the first place God works isn't around us? What if it's within us? Think about Joseph. I used to read the prison as an obstacle on the way to the palace. I don't read it that way anymore. The prison wasn't just where Joseph waited. It was where God built him. If Joseph had reached the palace before he learned humility, before he learned to forgive the brothers who sold him, would he have survived what came next? I don't think so. His position could only grow as big as his character had already become. Some of the delays you're living through right now aren't delays at all. They're preparation. And preparation never feels exciting while it's happening. It feels slow, hidden, ordinary. No one applauds a tree for growing roots because no one can see them. But without those roots, the tree doesn't survive the first real storm. Prayer works the same way. The deepest changes happen underground, long before anyone, including you, notices them. You don't wake up one morning suddenly fearless. Your reactions just get a little gentler. Your peace starts depending less on outcomes and more on His character. And one day, you realize you've changed, not because life got easier, but because every prayer was quietly reshaping you. There's a moment with Moses that captures this perfectly. After time alone with God on Mount Sinai, he came down with his face literally shining, and he had no idea. The people saw it before he did. I love that detail, because the deepest spiritual changes are almost always like that. Everyone else notices before we do. Have you ever known someone who went through unthinkable pain and came out kinder instead of bitter? Calmer instead of anxious? That didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened in 1,000 quiet ones, in prayers, in tears, in waiting. Here's what I think we get wrong about prayer. We treat it like a way to convince a reluctant God to finally move, as if He needs to be persuaded, as if He didn't already love us before we opened our mouths. Prayer isn't information. He already knows. It isn't persuasion. He already cares. Prayer is relationship, the place where frightened hearts learn to trust, where anxious minds borrow peace they can't manufacture on their own. That's why Jesus prayed constantly, even though the Father already knew every need before He asked. Communion wasn't for information. It was for strength. Maybe that's the real secret. We become like whoever we spend our time with. Slowly, quietly, almost without noticing. And isn't that true in every relationship you've ever had? So here's the shift I want to leave you with. For years I asked, God, when are you going to answer my prayer? Now I ask something different. God, what are you building in me while I wait? That single change in the question changed everything about how I experience silence. Waiting still hurts. I'm not pretending it doesn't. Even David cried. Even Jeremiah wept. Even Jesus grieved in that garden. Faith doesn't erase emotion. It just gives you somewhere to carry it. So if you're holding a prayer tonight that feels like it's gone nowhere, please don't mistake silence for absence. The gardener does his most important work underground. The foundation gets built before anyone ever admires the walls, and the deepest roots always grow where nobody's watching. Maybe, while you're waiting for God to change your circumstances, He's preparing you for something your present heart couldn't yet carry. And one day, looking back, you may find that the greatest answer to your prayer was never what God gave you. It was who you became while you waited. Before you go, I'd love to know, has a prayer ever seemed unanswered, only for you to realize, years later, God was doing something far bigger than you could see at the time? Tell me in the comments. Someone reading it today might need your story more than you know. Because the greatest miracle of prayer isn't always that God changes your circumstances. Sometimes, it's that He changes the one walking through them. So, if tonight you're still waiting, don't stop praying, don't stop trusting, and don't mistake God's silence for His absence. He may be doing His deepest work where you cannot yet see it. Walk with God.